All right. Shall we get going then? Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. As Women's History Month draws to a close, and as the Grameen Foundation approaches our 25th anniversary, we are here to talk about women who make history every day. Today, we pay tribute to female farmers who are making very bold choices to help their families, often in the face of climate change, discrimination, and gender-based violence. Thanks to our donors and partners, the Grameen Foundation is privileged to empower these women and to break down obstacles that perpetuate the cycle of poverty. My name is Gigi Gatti, and I am joined today by my colleagues. Next slide, please. So this will be our agenda for today, and my colleagues Lakshmi, Bobby, Alfred, and myself will be going through with you on a series of learning journey, if I may put it that way, to share with you what we are learning and doing in Grameen Foundation to address the digital gender divide in agriculture with some focus on climate change. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the day. And if you can take a little bit of time to locate your Q&A button in the Zoom toolbar, you can submit your questions there as we go along so you don't forget. And please take your questions and curiosities, as much as you can, and we will be very happy to address them. Also, we would appreciate it if you could please mute your microphone to minimize any background noise for everyone's comfort. We hope you will find this conversation informative, inspiring, and for those of you who are inspired to further support these efforts, you will see a text to give number and a link later on for you to be able to get in touch with us. Now, I'd like to introduce Lakshmi here, Grameen's Innovation in Agriculture Director. Over to you, Lakshmi.
Thank you so much, Gigi. I'd like to start out by talking a little bit about the Grameen Foundation here before speaking about women farmers and their climate-related challenges. I'd really like to highlight that as an organization, Grameen Foundation has been empowering rural poor and especially women farmers out of poverty for 25 years. We've been partnering with and building the capacity of local organizations, working with smallholder farmers globally, impacting their incomes and their productivity. And really to do this well, we've used innovative, user-friendly digital agricultural services. Before we start working with the community in any location, we really aim to try and understand the ecosystem of key stakeholders and really trying to understand the gaps that women farmers are facing in their local contexts. We then try to think through with these key stakeholders, what's the type of support that would improve their lives? What would support look like for well-being of their households? What would reduce the shocks they face to their livelihoods and boost their incomes? By using this type of needs-based approach, the services that Grameen Foundation has engaged communities with improves efficiencies, lowering the cost of accessing information, increases timeliness, which is tight, we know, within any agricultural season, and are those that continue to have feedback loops with the farmers so that there could be more of a personalized and targeted approach. Later in this webinar, my colleagues will speak more about the specific digital agricultural services that we've engaged farmers with. Next slide, please. Farmers are vulnerable to shocks. We all know that. In addition to issues they regularly face around crop price volatility, as well as saving for hunger seasons and the next agricultural season's inputs and a wide myriad of challenges, climate change poses yet another pressing challenge that they need to deal with. And climate change negatively affects earning capacity and food security through weather-related diseases like droughts, floods, infestations of uncontrollable pests and diseases, climate change is increasing the uncertainty and the risk involved in agriculture as a livelihood. Soils and land that farmers have been tilling for centuries are now being eroded, and yields that farmers wait entire seasons for are now in jeopardy. In general, we've learned that women farmers, in comparison to male farmers, are more susceptible to the effects of climate change. And this is largely a result of various factors, from social to economic to cultural. They have less access to information. And even if they do have access, they have greater workloads, rendering them with less time to implement learnings. Women farmers' livelihoods are also heavily reliant on natural resources, and they use these natural resources from wood and kindling and water for cooking and heating the house to taking care of small ruminants and poultry. As a result of all of these factors, we're finding that women are less likely to be involved in decision making, especially when it comes to climate change adaptation and management for their entire household. However, there's a shining light. Research shows that when women farmers' voices are taken into account, when putting in place climate adaptation measures, they support not only themselves and their households, but their entire communities as well. At this point, I'm going to pause. We'd love to hear from the audience. There is a poll that we'd like to take with respect to trying to understand the amount of land that smallholder women farmers own. Please take a moment to answer this poll. And I'll just pause here for a moment or two. Okay, I hope everybody's had the chance to respond. Women predominate in the world's food production, ranging from 50 to 80% of all food production. And we'd like to understand your responses when it comes to the farmland that they own. So the majority of folks have suggested 20%, which is great. As it stands today, women farmers do constitute 15 to 20% of all those owning land in sub-Saharan Africa. In addition, women farmers also receive less than 10% available credit and 7% credit extension services that are available to all farmers. Male farmers are more readily able to access inputs, information, other resources that support them to achieve 20 to 30% higher yields than women farmers on average, and therefore combat climate change more effectively. Digital agricultural services that we've empowered women farmers to leverage, they do help mitigate some of these challenges. It's not always an easy picture, though. There are barriers to women farmers adopting these services. At this time, I'd like to invite my colleague Bobby to delve deeper into the barriers that women farmers face when adopting digital agricultural services. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lakshmi. And as Gigi introduced me earlier, I'm Grameen Foundation's Research Director, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you here today. So what we wanted to do is take a little bit of a deep dive into the barriers that women face. And many of these barriers start from the very beginning, simply by how we define a farmer. In many instances, the partners that we work with, as well as the people that we work with, often define a farmer as a person who is the landowner, simply because this is assumed to be the person making the most decisions and who has the decision-making power to decide what happens on the land. Women will often be, when they become a farmer or are defined as a farmer, this is usually through their inheritance of land, either as a single woman who has inherited land from their family, through divorce, or through being widowed. There are two women on this slide. Both of them we've had the pleasure to meet in the Brongahafo region for a project that many of you may know about, called the Satellite for Farming, or SAT for Farming project, that has been implemented in Ghana with cocoa farmers. Through this project, we've been able to meet Comfort, who is on the left, and Joyce, who is on the right. Comfort is a divorced woman. She inherited land from her family, and she's a female-headed household. She relies on her nephew to help her farm on the land. However, Joyce, who is on the right, has been widowed. And I'd like to invite my colleague Alfred to share a little bit of her story, because we had the opportunity to interview both of these women actually over several years, but recently returned to both of them in January to talk a little bit about how they see land ownership and the vulnerability they face through some of the social norms that exist in Ghana. So Alfred, do you mind sharing a little bit about Joyce's story?
Yeah, sure, Bobby. Thank you. So Farmer Joyce is a 53-year-old widow with 5 children. And apart from cultivating cocoa on a large scale, she also trades in plantain and smoked fish. So Joyce's husband died in 2016, and her husband and family bequeathed to her, farmland after the demise of her husband. But traditionally, Joyce has access to the land, but she needs to provide farm produce at the end of harvest, and also provide locally brewed drinks to her husband's family as custom demands to be able to hold on to the land, lest she loses it. So this goes to show how socio-cultural norms to women's rights to land for agriculture can intersect with, gender issues to limit women's rights, like Joyce's rights to farming lands, and can even influence, how Joyce invests in an environment of land insecurity in Ghana. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Alfred. So really what we've learned is that, starting at the beginning, whether these women have been part of cocoa farming households for their whole life, like in both cases, they both grew up in cocoa farming households, they supported those activities up until, adulthood, and at no point of time were they considered a farmer. And in many instances, they would not have been contacted by an agricultural extension agent because they were not the landowner. But at some point, they gained access to that land and became a farmer. Some of the irony is that despite their expertise in the farming household, they may not have had the opportunity to access services because of their marital status. So in the next slide, one of the additional barriers that we talk about often is just women's time use. Who simply has time to be a farmer? We know from statistics that women often have double to triple labor burdens compared to men. They wake up very early in the morning to prepare the household, to cook breakfast, get their children ready for school. As you see in these pictures, they gather water, they chop firewood, they cook, they clean. And oftentimes, once children are off at school, they may go to the farm to help on weeding, watering, any of the labor tasks that are needed at that time of the year, depending on the harvest cycle. They'll come home for lunch, they'll cook and clean that up. And then they may use the afternoon to do some income generation of their own. But then that may mean maybe 2 or 3 hours out of the total day that they've done income generation for themselves. They'll come home, cook, clean, get their children bathed and ready for the next day. So the days are very long. And so oftentimes women will not have access to digital agricultural services or in-person services because of the length of the day, as well as when services are often provided, which may be when they are on the farm or trying to conduct their own business. So on the next slide, another barrier that we often have to consider in designing the services is simply who has permission. So in both of these pictures, we have the male spouse of the woman, and oftentimes in different cultural and social contexts, women simply do not have permission to, number one, engage with a male who is not a family member. So this often means that she cannot meet with a male extension agent. And this really speaks to some of the strategy that Grameen has pursued to recruit and retain and support female agents so that women can readily communicate and interact with people who are not their family members. And then on the next slide, we think about agricultural extension support, but the other types of support we have to consider, and Lakshmi touched on these, is financial support, which is represented in the picture on the left, technology support. Oftentimes women do not have access to mobile phones or smartphones where they may be able to access information. And if literacy levels of women are not taken into consideration, as we know, women are often more illiterate than men, then even if they have access to the technology, they may not be able to read it. And then on the right-hand side, peer support. Many of the services we have to design have to consider where women are already meeting, or how can you meet them in groups. This peer support is often also just used to help women learn from each other, grow leadership skills in a safe environment. And on the financial services picture on the left, an important lesson that we've learned is that even though we often talk about agricultural financing, which assumes you need credit in financial services to support farm activities, because women are often not the farmer and not making decisions on the farm, oftentimes they are doing their own small income generation. And so women need access to financing to support some of those other income generating activities that help support the diversification of income of the household. So now I'd like to pass it back to Alfred, who's going to talk a little bit more about how Grameen Foundation uses this information to design the different types of methodologies that we have been implementing for digital agricultural services. So Alfred, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby. So if you could come with me for a ride, just to explore the scope of work that Grameen Foundation and partners have been doing when it comes to deploying digital agriculture services across the globe. So for 25 years, Grameen Foundation have worked with a range of local partners to deploy digitally enabled agriculture services that have helped to meet the needs of farmers, especially women, small-scale producers. We have done this by deploying mobile tools and technology, and importantly, built the capacity of agriculture agents. Our approach is one that leverages digital tools to generate profiling data on a farming family we work with, so as to understand each of the farming households and what their key needs and competency gaps are, so that we can work with our local partners and agriculture agents to provide targeted agriculture information and services to farmers, and also track their compliance with an agreed plan of action to develop their farms, and also provide coaching to ensure that women farmers are consistently adopting good agricultural practices and are becoming more resilient to erratic rainfall patterns, and also adopting practices that help retain water in the soil. Next slide, please. So Grameen and partners typically deploy a mix of content-specific digital channels to meet the needs of the entire farming household, including channels that are user-friendly for the woman farmer. We deploy the use of short messaging services, SMS, interactive voice response, or voice messaging services that are delivered in local languages to the mobile phone of a woman small-scale producer. We also use mass communication channels like farmer radio programming to reach a large number of women small-scale farmers in East and West Africa and also Asia, with new farming information quickly and cheaply. So the digital agriculture services we deploy are either directly accessed by the farmer or are intermediated by a well-trained agriculture agent who handholds farmers to conveniently access customized, actionable agriculture information. We will now look at some examples of channels that are accessed directly by women farmers to improve their agricultural livelihoods, and that makes them more resilient to climate change. Next slide. In Ghana, we provide customized radio sets to women farmer groups to come together in the late afternoons to listen to live farmer radio programs. The good thing is that the radio programs are delivered in local languages, and the radio sets have the functionality to record live radio programs so that women who missed the program because of a household chore can listen to the program at a later time. This is a photo of one of the women farmer groups that were supported with radio sets to listen in to weekly live radio programs or record them for later use. Some of the women in these farmer listening groups call in during the live radio programs, and they are able to ask specific questions and instantly receive advice on good agricultural practices. And then the radio programs also provide information on weather forecasts and also pest and disease management so that farmers that we work with can plan with it. Next slide. One other example of how digital agricultural services and information are provided directly to women farmers is through voice messages delivered to the mobile phone of the women farmers in a local language that they can relate to. This is Rosemary. Rosemary is a maize farmer in the middle belt of Ghana. Before joining Grameen's program, she lost, a lot of her maize after harvest because of pest infestation as a result of poor storage practices. But today she receives weekly tips on her mobile phone on how to correctly store her maize produce to minimize losses after harvest. She's now a happy farmer and earns more income from the sale of her maize. Next slide. While Rosemary's husband, Fatao, also a maize farmer, receives a different message set on his mobile phone based on his key need established at the start of the program. He listens to weekly tips on good agricultural practices, specifically on the importance of planting in rows so as to increase crop productivity. Let me emphasize that from what we know, the choice of whether a farmer will opt to listen to her farming tip or read the farming advice as an SMS or short messaging service actually depends on their literacy and comfort level. Next slide. Now this coconut farmer in the Philippines prefers to receive content on good agricultural practices as a short messaging service that is sent to his mobile phone because he can conveniently read and can always make reference to the content on his phone when need be. Next slide. It is actually same for this female coconut farmer who receives an SMS containing good agricultural practices and cash management practices. There is an early warning system that also triggers alerts on weather conditions and potential pest and disease outbreaks using weather and farm level data. Though SMS or voice messages alone can be a powerful driving action, as seen in the deployment of our early warning system for weather and pest and disease management, Grameen Foundation sometimes go beyond deploying SMSs or voice messages or broadcasting live radio programs to put the human component at the center of our technology-enabled programs. This is the case where the delivery of the extension service is intermediated by an agriculture agent. Next slide. Now the question is, how have we done this? We train and build the capacity of these agriculture agents to use technology as a tool to effectively deliver extension to farmers. The digitally equipped agriculture agents handhold and coach farmers to take up good agricultural practices. And then with this particular delivery channel, the agents are provided with digital content management tools like you're seeing on the screen, containing good agricultural practices, financial literacy models, and pests and disease management resources so that they are able to support farmers better and engage better with them in the delivery of customized extension services. Next slide. Now the agriculture agent works with farmers and visits them regularly to help them with their finances, also track their productivity, and provide them options on how they can best manage their farms. The agriculture agents are equipped with mobile applications that they use to profile farming families. And this profiling data does help to establish the foundation and baseline to customize support services to farmers, especially women. And the data spans socioeconomic information, environmental related information, financial inclusion data points, and even data on adoption of good agricultural practices. Next slide. The data collected by the field agents using the mobile application include the farmers and then also the family members profile, productive profile, socioeconomic profile, and very important is the financial profile created to support especially women farmers to have access to finance to either support their farming activities or even diversify their livelihoods. Next slide. Information on household members' participation in decision-making regarding a farming activity or to understand the role women play in the agricultural value chain is also collected so that we can identify those activities and accordingly support women with targeted extension services. Next slide. Now, the use of digital tools by the agriculture agents enables them to provide personalized coaching and provide ongoing monitoring to the farmers to increase crop yields and income. The benefits we are seeing for the farmers we work with, leveraging digital tools and data include empowering them and also providing some level of transparency into their activity. And then agriculture agents are able to tailor their services to the farmers. And also they are able to promote good agricultural practices based on what experts believe make farmers resilient to climate change or erratic rainfall patterns. Next slide. Pictured in this slide is how the agriculture agents equipped with digital tools are able to support women farmers to adopt best practices that help to retain water on their farms and adopt other climate smart agriculture practices. The information Grameen and partners disseminate using digital channels are actionable and accessible. We make it easy for especially women farmers to apply best practices. And we also continue to pay attention to the very little details around the literacy levels of women farmers and how agriculture agents can help them to overcome that barrier and how peer support from women groups can build the confidence of women in the use of digital agriculture services. We continue to engage other influencers at the community level to be more supportive at bridging the gap to women's access to technology-enabled agriculture services. Ours as an organization is one of technology with a human face. And that helps women farmers actually bypass cultural constraints on their mobility that limit access to digital agriculture services. I hope I was able to give you an idea of the many ways that Grameen approaches the use of digital-enabled solutions for agriculture. At this point, I would like to pass it over to my colleague, Gigi Gatti, who will present how all these pieces actually work together for women, our vision, and specific examples of current projects in Grameen that addresses gender, agriculture, and digital agriculture services. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alfred. Next slide, please, Prinsha. Thank you so much. Yeah. So now that we have defined the problem, identified the barriers, and showed you some solutions, let's talk a little bit about how to put all of these things together. To overcome the barriers and optimize the promise of technology, here are the top 3 things to consider. The first is that in as much as we'd like to do a cut and paste of successful projects, one size does not fit all. To be successful, we need to know the social, economic, and cultural factors that influence and even limit women's access to technology and adoption. Social and cultural factors are much, much bigger issues than what digital solutions or apps can solve. We should consider, for example, if the use of technology or promoting certain practices will increase the burden on women, or if it will increase the possibility of gender-based violence. The second one is that climate change, such a big word, climate change. We need to recognize that climate change is not a woman's problem alone. It is a household and a community problem. It is a national and a global problem. Let's not put the burden on individual women, but rather seek solutions that involve women's support systems, starting from her family to peers to influencers, that ultimately and hopefully leads to women being part of the decision-making process. And as we grow along, there will be women who will stand out to position themselves to influence policy. Next is the use of technology. Use of technology should not leave women, confused, afraid, or frustrated. They should come out of it feeling empowered. I still remember when I got my first ATM card with my first payroll, and I was like, whoa, I am made. That kind of elation, that kind of empowerment, that is the feeling that we should leave them with. Remember that women have many responsibilities and that time is limited. We need to meet these women where they are. If they can access their phones for only 10 minutes a day, what do we want them to know or learn in that 10 minutes so that they can move on and be these empowered women that we want them to be? So you will hear me keep on saying, let's meet the women where they are. So if they do not have access to phones, we still need to get to them, usually via agriculture agents, as what Alfred was talking about, for women who have feature phones. We should think about how can we combine the agriculture agent visits and even the group meetings that they have with their savings groups with SMS and IVR, interactive voice response, because that is something that feature phones are capable of. Then, can we use radio to complement the information that the agriculture agents are imparting? As infrastructure for the internet grows, it should become cheaper and more available. And once it becomes so, it opens the doors to simple applications that women can use on their own. Normally at this point, digital literacy is still not mature enough to use complex applications that are also costly to access. They're not normally free. So the agriculture agents continue to play a role, but gradually shifting, not only the knowledge, but the digital literacy skills to the women farmers. And as women access digital literacy evolves, we should also respond accordingly. So in other words, there are different tiers and we should always be conscious of those tiers. Now, next slide, please. Now, I'd like to spend and pause for a few minutes and share with you what we are doing in Grameen Foundation. And these are active projects. These are active 2 projects that we have selected to share with you today. The first one is AgriPath. And in AgriPath, you can see here that it is a multi-organization consortium. And this brings together all the different strengths of these organizations. AgriPath aims to reach 50,000 smallholder farmers, of which about 20 to 30% are women farmers. as well as 250 agriculture agents in 5 countries: Burkina Faso, Uganda, Tanzania, India, and Nepal. It is a multi-year initiative that aims to bring sustainable agriculture to scale by identifying, evaluating, and promoting promising pathways for digitally supported agriculture advisory services that effectively and efficiently empower not only female, but also the male smallholders, of course. Yeah. And this is very important because we want them to be able to make informed decisions and sustainably increase their agriculture productivity, income, and climate resilience through the uptake of sustainable farming practices. That's a whole load of things. So the consortium includes the Center for Development and Environment, as you can see here, the University of Lausanne, okay, Grameen Foundation, us, Grameen Foundation India, our sister company in India, International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology, and Farm Better Limited. Next slide, please. So AgriPath will bring together and compare 3 types of digital advisory systems. And this is really an exciting thing because it will combine Grameen's agent-based facilitated model, Farm Better's self-service model, and then we will also have a hybrid wherein the agent is the main user of the advanced app features and farmers are using some features by themselves. In effect, this project is an action research project and will provide us the first-hand empirically grounded evidence to help mainstream the use of tailor-made digital agriculture systems in extension services. And hopefully with that, we can help also increase the private investments for upscaling sustainable agriculture in Africa and Asia. This project has a unique and innovative mix of research methods and household decision processes. So AgriPath is positioned to be a major contributor to the scientific debate on gendered, youth, and community access to the use of digital agriculture solutions, technology adoption, and the long-term change of farming systems. Next slide, please. And the next example is MANDI, okay? So MANDI stands for Market Access Enabled by Digital Innovation in India. So MANDI's goal is to really strengthen the capacity of farmer-producer organizations, or FPOs in short, to connect smallholder farmers, especially women members, to markets and finance in order to improve farmers' income and resilience. Together with the Grameen Foundation India, we will build the capacity of 40 farmer-producer organizations in Uttar Pradesh. You can see the map. And to better support smallholder farmers, to diversify and intensify their agriculture production, such as intercropping, planting vegetables during additional crop cycle, and so on, by using digital technology and data to connect them to sources of extension, climate smart act practices, markets, and finance. So the special focus of MANDI is also to build the capacity in gender mainstreaming, to improve outreach, membership, and leadership by women within these FPOs. So next slide, please. So in conclusion, yeah, women, digital agriculture, climate change, it requires a whole complex, holistic approach delivered as simple and uncomplicated as we can. That is the challenge of this. So according to an article published by the United Nations, women are always in the shadow of climate change. But oftentimes when we talk about women and climate change, women are seen as victims of climate change. But they can also be active and effective agents and promoters of adoption and mitigation. What does this truly mean, to be resilient to climate change? It means that we are able to develop the capacity to anticipate climate risks and hazards, absorb shocks and stresses, and put in place resources and assets that will minimize the impact of climate change. For smallholder farmers, it could be in the form of adapting to new planting and harvesting cycles based on the changing weather patterns. It could mean investing in solar irrigation systems, small dams to address drought. It could mean cold storage for produce to minimize loss. So building climate resilience involves many, many actors beyond individuals, their families and communities. It is a huge task that involves the government, private sector, educational institutions, and many more. That's why we need those partnerships, that Alfred was talking about and Lakshmi also talked about. And here we see that digital technologies hold a tremendous potential as an enabler and as a tool for empowering women. Involving women in the development of new technologies and the design of applications can help ensure that climate-smart ag technology is practicable, usable, and sustainable. Again, we need to meet women where they are, but without losing sight of the ultimate goal of bringing the power of technology into their fingertips to optimize their potential. Addressing the gender divide and building resilience to climate change can start with small steps. And for as long as there is a pathway, these small steps matter very much. So thank you so much. And I hope that conclusion was helpful to bring all the pieces together. And I think we can now move on to our Q&A. And Bobby, would you nicely indulge us, in our Q&A session? Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gigi, and all of my colleagues for your points. I'm always learning, even as I listen to you, even though we work together quite closely on things. So we have a few questions in the Q&A for now, and there's 2 questions from Hudson, and I'll ask them together because I think you can answer them together. So the first question is, with these digital interventions, what are the sources of content? Third parties, or are they developed internally within Grameen Foundation? And he's also curious about how can his organization be part of the type of work that we're doing, since they are also implementing, and I'm not reading verbatim, but they are part of the Continental Initiative using a digital platform to reach extension agents with information on sustainable agriculture. So I don't know, maybe Alfred, I'll let you go first, since I know that you often have had very deep engagement with a lot of the messaging development in some of our projects in Ghana. And then I'll let Lakshmi, if you or Gigi want to add on and complement what Alfred says.
Yeah, sure, Bobby. So for Grameen Foundation, it has always been a mixed method approach when it comes to content development. So we do have expertise in-house. We develop some of the content. Sometimes these contents already exist. We don't seek to replicate or duplicate them. We leverage on what already exists. And even when the content are developed, they are always validated by the requisite government agencies like Ministry of Food and Agriculture, the Directorate of Agriculture Extension Services. So there's a thorough process through which we iterate in content development and validate them with the key experts before they are deployed. And I would say that there's even pre-testing of content, going out to the field to pre-test to ensure the appropriateness and correctness and relevance of the content even before they are finalized and deployed. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Maybe Gigi, I'll let you answer the question of how can my organization be part of this, since they also are working on digital platforms to reach extension agents.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Bobby and Hudson, for that question. We are always open to partnerships. We are always seeking partnerships, especially local partnerships, meaning that they operate in the site, where we have our projects and our programs. And yeah, I would advise Hudson, please contact us, and we can take it from there. We are, as Alfred has mentioned, very open in terms of platforms. Although I must say that a lot of these platforms that we were talking about were also made and developed by Grameen. So we do have a technology team inside Grameen, but it does not mean that we have to do everything. So we actually prefer, because we have to adhere, to the principles of digital development, we need to be able to choose and select that technology that makes it matter more, and that we don't have to push a particular solution. For that, we are solution agnostic. Yeah, thanks, Hudson. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Gigi. So we also have another question from Bruce, and he asks, how does cost per farmer change with scale, and how do benefits compare to costs? So it's a pretty big question. So which of you three would like to tackle that one?
Maybe I can go first, and
Sure.
I'm sure Bobby and all of you, can contribute. This is a very challenging question. There is no one answer to this. I would just say that, right? What happens though is that investments have to be made for piloting and gathering evidence for solutions. And at that point, it will definitely be a costly proposition. And if you look at the per farmer cost, maybe it's gonna be very expensive. And as you can see, this is not about giving one initial, it's not about one intervention. It is a gamut of many interventions. So as we said, you have to look at the social, cultural side, economic side, the digital literacy. There's many things that you should be looking at. Now, the way we at least, do the benefits analysis is that we do our baseline, our midline, and our endline assessments. However, that does not really capture all the time, the change that we need to see, because some of these programs are really funded only for 24 months, sometimes 18 months. So this is, again, a collaboration that we need with our partners to continue the work so that we have enough data to be able to say whether these interventions really make an impact. And at that point, what is it really costing, for us to be able to sustain it. But in essence, the goal is really to scale. And therefore, in effect, we should be seeing that costs drive down very, very, fast. Okay, so does anybody need to add to that? Bobby, do you want to add about that, how expensive the research is that we need to invest in? I mean, honestly, we need to invest in that piece, because if we don't invest in research, then we will not, be able to drive the cost down by making the same mistakes over and over again.
Right. Well, and I think that's what's exciting about our participation in the AgriPath project, right? Because it is action research. And one of the questions we have is, there's so much technology being created, but how do you get it into the hands of farmers, and how do you get them to adopt it? It's easy to create the application, and it's easy to scale an app as long as people take it up. There can be a lot of production that goes into the development of those, but if nobody's taking them up, then of course the cost per farmer using it is pretty high. So I think we're very interested in helping answer that question. And I don't think we have great answers to that, because it really varies. And, like we started out talking, there's kind of two approaches. There's that human facilitated access to digital agricultural services through extension agents, right? They're the ones using the technology on behalf of a farmer and helping them use the information coming through that technology. And then there are these other types of interventions where they go directly to the farmer, where they're either accessing the voice messages on their phone or SMS. I mean, some things can be very cost effective and simple to do, as long as you fully understand how farmers can absorb that information, whether, like Gigi talked about earlier about the, sending messages through feature phones. Like, if that's what people have access to, it's more cost effective if you use the technology that they can easily take up, and adopt. So great. So one of the other questions that we have from Daniel is, what projects include a financial arm such as loans?
Alfred, do you want to take that, or should I, or?
Oh, go ahead, Gigi, I can chime in.
Sure, yeah. So the Mandy project actually has a financial arm, yeah. I didn't discuss that because I didn't want to sway, as far as the main interventions are concerned. But part of that, capacitating the FPOs and connecting them to digital technology to professionalize their operations is actually the financial services piece. So as we see, we do not, what we do is we work with these FPOs in order to make their operations, better recorded, that they are complying, to regulations, etc. And that opens the door for them to be able to access loans. We are also working on what we call the Grameen Mitras. And this is something different because Grameen Mitras is our signature program in India, wherein we have women who are technology enabled, mobile enabled, and they go house to house. And these women actually provide digital finance services such as payments, Aadhaar based transactions, to women. And households, to other women and households. So basically, these women are also part of the Mitra projects so that they can extend financial services to the farmers and their farming families as well. We also have projects wherein we actually catalyze the important connection, between data and credit. So an example of that would be a project in Colombia wherein we took, the credit rating that the cooperative was using, and we infused it with non-economic variables. So this is exciting because this is actually the first time that you take into consideration attitude of the farmers as well as their propensity to adopt to recommendations, good agriculture production recommendations. And with that, the scoring becomes a different way of scoring, and it gives you a different perspective of who can actually be given higher loans than those who can't. So these are just examples of it. And as Alfred was talking about also and Bobby also alluded to the SAT for Farming project, this is also something wherein we are looking at opportunities, and this is not an existing project, but looking for opportunities to use the data again in the credit decision making for farmers, using the investment plan.
Great. Thank you, Gigi. And I know that we're at time. And so before I turn it back to you, there was one last question in the chat about whether Grameen Foundation employs staff like extension officers for continuity purposes, or do they use volunteers all the time? Maybe I'll just answer that quickly and then turn it back to you. In the past, Grameen Foundation did work with its own cadre of extension officers in Uganda. And I think one of the experiences that we learned through that is that it's better to work with organizations who have constant contact with their own volunteers or staff, just for sustainability issues. One of the lessons we learned is that if there's not somebody to pick those volunteers or agents up, it's very difficult to continue programming. And so I think one of our key lessons through some of the prior experiences we had when we actually did recruit volunteers is that it's better to work with those local organizations who have continual contact with them. So Gigi, I'm going to turn it back over to you to close us out. And thank you for the questions, everyone.
Absolutely. And thank you, Bobby. And thank you to Lakshmi and to Alfred as well. I hope with this that we have at least inspired you and added a little bit of knowledge to you as far as women, digital agriculture, and climate change connects and intersects. If you are interested in supporting us or supporting women like Comfort and Joyce, please consider giving a gift by texting GROW to 707070. This is a US number. So if you are not within the US, you can also visit our website at go.grameenfoundation.org/grow. Thank you so much. And we are hoping to hear from you again soon.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.